Hello, everyone. Welcome back. If this is your first time, this is The Other Side of the Table. I'm your host, Keith. This podcast is where we talk about conversations people usually avoid, especially around work, growth, and the things we say out loud. This is only episode 2, and we're still building from the ground up. Honestly, this podcast is a learning experience for me, not just in conversation, but also behind the scenes, lighting, audio, video, and lighting, editing all of those. We're still figuring things out step by step. So if you're also figuring things out, whether it's in your career or something you're building, you are in the right place. Starting today, I'm not doing this alone. I'm joined by my best friend as a regular co host. We've had countless real conversations about work, growth, and a lot of frustrations. And instead of keeping those private, we're bringing them here. Welcome, Ellen.
Hey everyone, thank you for the introduction, Keith. I'm Elyn Aragon and I'm so happy to be here. First off, congratulations on the podcast. I've listened to the first episode. It was very timely for me, especially because our company's fiscal year starts in April, so it was definitely goal setting season.
Thank you, thank you.
Uh, and as Keith mentioned, he and I have been friends for a long time, even professionally. I have been working in the IT industry for 20 plus years, so feel free to compete my age. And we've crossed paths as coworkers, whether intentionally or not. And I'm excited to share our experiences and perspectives in the workplace culture in this podcast.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, so now let's get into it. Okay. For today's topic, this is about promotion and progression. Okay. First question. How many times have you felt like you were the hardest worker in the room, but still you did not get promoted? Tonight, we are breaking that idea apart. Does hard work really lead to promotions, or it's just something we were told to believe? Because, on paper, it really looks simple, right? You do great work. You hit your targets, your KPIs, you stay consistent, and then you move up. That is the story that we are often told, right? But in reality, promotion inside the company, they are rarely linear. They are shaped by timing, visibility, business needs, right? Budget, especially budget, and sometimes even things you don't see happening on the background. So, in this episode, we're going to break that down. What actually drives promotion? What people often misunderstand about the process? And how can you position yourself to be more effective so that when the next opportunity comes, you'd be promoted, or at least you have a higher chance of being promoted, right? So, what do you
Right.
think,
Yeah.
sister?
Yeah, I think you see that's where a lot of people get surprised. They assume performance is the finish line when
Hmm.
it's really just one part of the promotion equation. Um so don't get me wrong, I still believe effort matters. Companies reward results. If you're consistent, reliable and delivering, then promotion should follow.
Right. And it should, but does it, really follow?
Yeah, so that's the reality of it. Promotions aren't simply rewards for good performance. They are business decisions, and those decisions are primarily driven by what the company believes will benefit the organization most.
Hmm.
And that is not always fair.
So, if these are driven by what the company believes will benefit the organization, why do still some of our hardest worker, they still feel stuck, right? And if these people are the ones who are doing really well, to keep these people, right, to move them up the ladder is something that would benefit the organization. But why do they still feel stuck?
Well, it's because they're quietly effective. There's no
Hmm.
visibility, there's no narrative. Leadership promotes impact that they can see. So, effort alone isn't enough if no one recognizes it.
Right. Well, you say you need to be seen, right?
Mhm.
But is that just office politics? Or, is that something that people use just an excuse if they don't want to get promoted or if they don't want to promote somebody?
Mm. So, politics isn't really about games or hidden agendas the way people
Mhm.
often think. At its core, it's just relationships and perception. It's about whether people know you, whether they trust you, and whether they understand the value you bring. So, here's the important part. It's not politics instead of performance. It's both. You still have to deliver, you still have to show results, but performance alone isn't always enough if no one sees it, don't understand it, or they don't connect it to your name. When
Mhm.
people know you, they trust you, and they consistently see your impact, you're already ahead, sometimes more than you realize.
Right, right. Well, I remember this real world scenario of one of my
Story time.
friends back then, right? Um, I've seen this firsthand. So I knew this operations manager that works in a service desk company, right? Her account was stable. Metrics were good, KPIs are really doing well. And when her manager had to step away, right, for whatever reason, she ran the entire operations alone for 2 months, maybe more. I don't know, right? But she did the job without the title. And her account during that time was even used as a model for prospective new clients, right? So when a higher role opened up, everybody assumed that she would get it, because she was really doing well. But instead, the company hired externally. What's ironic for her is that she was asked to train the person that they hired externally, and eventually she left. Shortly after that, the account struggled. I'm not really sure if it's because of the um, external hire, right? Maybe just a coincidence. But the thing there is, I don't think it was just a mispromotion. It was a mispromotion and a missed opportunity for the company.
Yeah, exactly. Because promotion isn't just recognition, it's also a retention tool used by management.
Mhm.
So when organizations fail to promote proven talent, especially the manager that you shared in the story, I mean they lose them. No surprise there. And maybe again, other side of the table, right? It also makes you wonder what message that's sent out to her direct reports.
Right,
Here's
right,
someone who's clearly thriving, excelling in a higher role, doing everything right on paper. And yet she comes to a tough realization. Even that might not be enough to move her career forward the way she expected. And sometimes performance alone doesn't guarantee progression.
right, right. But you did mention performance alone doesn't guarantee promotion, right?
Hmm.
So let's try to talk about those other things other than performance that affects progression or promotion. Number one here is budget.
Hmm.
So
Keyword,
this is
yes.
where things get complicated because performance, as we've mentioned, right? It's not the only factor at play. Budget, it always comes into picture because it's something that is part of the consideration, right? Because when there's a promotion, the expectation is there's always an attached big time salary upgrade. But
Mhm.
this is something that is taken for granted by a lot of people, thinking that promotion alone, right, automatically would have a budget for you.
Mhm.
But my question is, right, and for our listeners, how much does budget really affect promotions?
Yeah, it's actually a lot more than people realize. So, promotions, like we said, isn't it's just aren't about performance. They're also
Hmm.
about cost, right? Promoting internally means adjusting salary within the budget line. And when you say salary, that's not what you receive on a monthly basis. There are sometimes, other incentives that comes with moving up the ladder. And that also goes into, the budget line. And so even strong performance has to align with financial planning, promotion cycles, and even organizational constraints. So sometimes it's not about whether you deserve the next role, it's about
Hmm.
whether the organization can actually support and afford it right now.
Right, right. And I think it's similar to how we have had our um performance reviews, bonuses, right? Budget is directly affected by how a company performs, right? If they
Mhm.
have a successful year, fiscal year, right, there's definitely going to be more budget to share around, right? But
Yeah.
if the performance of the company is not doing as well as they are expecting, right, then the budget may be lower, right?
Mhm.
So I think even if you are the obvious choice, but if there's no budget, right,
Mm.
budget can still block your promotion.
Yes, yes, of course, and that's a hard truth. Money talks. Again, this is a business we're talking about. At the end of the day, the company needs to take care of its numbers. And again, just for our listeners, some of you may be familiar with this, maybe some of you aren't. But when we talk about company budget, and even what the company is able to achieve financial year, they look at it as an aggregate of everything that or all what all of the teams are able to deliver. So let's
Right,
say for example, your team may have achieved your targets, you may have done well, but at the end of the day, if the rest of the teams in the organization wasn't able to meet their targets, then the company might have ended up in the red at the end of the financial year, and that would again affect the budget for you and the rest of the other.
right, right. So something that uh we really need to consider. Sometimes you have the performance performing well, but if budget is not within, say, not within budget to have your promotion, then yes, you really may be um delayed at least, for a promotion. But anyhow, let's try to move on to another factor that we think really affects our uh, promotion or progression. Let's talk about company culture, right? And this is something that people often neglect when they're talking about promotion. It's the culture of the company. What do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you perform well, if the budget exists, but if the
Mhm.
company culture doesn't support growth, you'll still feel stuck. Some companies are performance driven. I think, you and I, safe to say, have worked so far in these types of company where their main consideration, I guess, one of the main things for consideration for promotion is, performance.
Right,
But, realistically, there are other companies that are more relationship driven or let's say tenure based.
right, right. And I can only think of one thing right now. Um, Family businesses, right? Because since this is family business, the number one for them is loyalty. And it's very evident in terms of the leadership positions that they have. That no matter how good you are, right, the next the successor of the company who's going to run the company is mostly from within the family, like the
Mhm.
firstborn, right, or someone
Yeah.
the wife or the daughter. And sometimes these people, they're not even, involved in the business at all. But
Yeah.
when time comes, right, when the parents or the owners of the company leave, it's up to uh, the sons or the daughters, the children, to step up, right?
Mhm. Exactly. And in those environments, again, no matter how capable you are, you have to wait for your turn. Sadly, like you mentioned, some of those leadership positions are already reserved
Mm-hmm.
for members of the family. So, blood or loyalty matters more than impact. And, that's not necessarily wrong, but you do to recognize where you are.
Right, right, definitely. Okay, but how do you know if it's you that is the main cause why you're not getting promoted, or it's really the environment?
Well, of course, first of all, you have to start by being honest with yourself. Are
Right.
you delivering results? Are you exceeding expectations? And if the answer to both those questions is yes, and nothing changes, then you may be in the wrong system. High performers still fail in the wrong company. And again, that I guess for me, one of the trickier parts about culture and company, environment is that you may not know what culture they have until you're already there. I mean,
Right.
you know, employment or during hiring, of course, you can ask friends who are working in that company, ask the internet. um, but again, you wouldn't know what exactly is happening in the particular team that you may be
Right.
part of until you're already immersed in it. And by that time, it may be already too late in a sense that, it's not something that you would want to be in terms of, growing your career. Um,
Right. Right.
so you have to be again honest and have to recognize that.
Right. Right. And I agree. Culture sometimes it's not something that you really are going to be able to say tell, right? Or even if you there's someone that you know inside the company, where they are, like the exact department may have a different culture than where you are, right? So
Yeah.
until you kind of really live through it, work with your
Mhm.
colleagues, your leaders, your managers, that's the only time that I think you'd be able to say or get a good grasp of what is the culture for that company,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Okay, well, those are very interesting topics, but let's go to some practical advice that we can share to our listeners, right? What should people actually do if they want to have a higher chance of being promoted?
All right. So, based on our conversation and things we've talked about here, I can think of four things. Um, First is document your wins. Um, this is a mantra for those who have worked in the service desk, in the help desk, in the support organizations. If it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? So that's why you need a record.
Hmm.
It can be something simple like your own tracker or a journal where you consistently log what you've accomplished each month. It doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, it might be a good idea to have like a shared file where your
Right.
manager can access that. And what matters is that your progress is visible, it's trackable, and it's not left to memory alone. I guess it's a common experience at the end of your performance evaluation cycle. You cram to write everything you've
Mm.
done for that year. Well, if you have it written down each month, then again, you're not leaving anything to memory.
Right. Right. I remember this thing saying in social media, the we call it the C book culture. right? So
Yeah,
that there's always
receipts,
going to
yes.
be proof, right, of what happened and something that you can't deny. So it's something that people definitely can use um, whenever they're tracking their work. And I think that's a pretty good advice.
Yeah, and right. So moving on to the second thing, not that you've written everything down. Well, now you need to speak up. Even
Mhm.
briefly. Like we said earlier, visibility matters. Um, and so I'm going to share something personal. I'm a natural introvert, and speaking up has never really come naturally to me. Okay. But over the course of my career, I realized something important, that if you want people to recognize your work and understand your value, you can't always stay silent, right? Sometimes the simplest and most effective thing you can do for your career is to speak up.
Right, right. Definitely. I agree to that.
Right. Now that you're speaking up, next thing is you have to ask directly. One of the most important career questions you can ask your manager is, what do I need to do to get promoted? Right? And honestly, that shouldn't be viewed as awkward or overly ambitious. It's a fair question. Because
It
at the
is.
end of
It
the day,
is.
right? Because at the end of the day, clarity matters. You need to understand the goals, expectations, even the improvement areas you should focus on if you want to move forward in your career.
Right, right. And I do remember that these two items that you mentioned, speaking up and asking directly, it ties well with our episode one about
Mm.
goals, right? So
Yeah.
when you're setting goals, you have to kind of let your manager know that, hey, manager, this year my goal, I really want to be promoted to the next level, right? And then on your other point here, asking directly, when you mention that you want to, part of your goal is to get promoted, you can also ask your manager, like, okay, if my goal is to be promoted to the next level, what are the things that I need to do, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still going to be a big part of, if you're going to get promoted, is going to be something that your manager will eventually decide on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely, ask directly. You don't want to focus on the wrong things. I mean,
Hmm.
you could find yourself investing effort in something that you think would benefit you or the organization, only to find out in the end that it's not really within what the goals or of the company or the team is.
Right.
So again, you'd want to get clarity as early as possible.
Good. Good. So
Okay.
what's next?
Yeah, so the fourth thing is don't assume you're being noticed because you probably aren't. I mean, everyone is caught up in their own world, what they're doing, what they're worried about, their own roadblocks, their own goals, what they're trying to fix. So while you might feel like all eyes are on you, well, in reality, they usually aren't.
Right. Right. That's for sure.
Yeah. And one last, I guess, tip from me, and here's something you can really take advantage of. Your regular one-on-ones with your manager. They're not just for raising issues and problems. They're also opportunities for you to highlight your progress and the milestones you've achieved. So when you think about it, right, you have this 30 minutes to maybe an hour of uninterrupted time with your immediate manager, someone who directly influences your growth and career. So make sure to use that time strategically.
Right. And I think this is something that I'd like to share. When I was early in my career, right, this one-on-ones with my manager, I tend to kind of shy away. Like I try to find ways not to find, to have that one-on-one with my manager. But eventually, as I was moving along, right, climbing up the ladder, there was a point where I realized that having this one-on-ones with my manager, right, is something that is beneficial for me. Not even in the promotional side of things, but how I work, right? Because I can kind of ask them, am I doing things right? What do they think are the things that I can kind of improve on? And that Having that realization made me kind of make full use of these one-on-ones with my manager. So yeah, yeah, okay. But the other question is, what if your manager, he or she doesn't schedule these one-on-one sessions with you?
Again, you ask. That is speaking up.
Mhm.
Um, if your manager consistently dodges those conversations, that's also a signal about the culture you're in. So take your cue.
Yes, yes, I do agree with that. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of the big things that people don't talk about, right? When they're um discussing about promotion. So I'm gonna try to land this. Okay. Here is the thing. Hard work matters. Of course it does. But we all know it's not a guarantee. Growth needs more than effort. It needs visibility. Yeah. It needs positioning. It needs timing. And honestly, promotion is really way less forward than people assume. So here's a question that I would like to leave our listeners. Are you working hard, or are you making sure people actually see the impact that you're making? Because working hard is really easy to defend, but being intentional, that's what moves you forward. Thank you. Thank you for hanging with us today. I'm Keith,
And I'm Ellen,
and this is The Other Side
other
of the
side of the
Table.
table.
Catch you in our next episode. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye bye.
everyone.